So, Marcela, thank you so much for joining me today on the podcast. I'm really happy to have you here.
Happy to be here. Thank you again, Cheryl, for having me.
So, I wanted to start off by talking a little bit about your company because it's so unique, and your background as well is just amazing. And tell us a little bit about what you do and how your personal experience has shaped designed engagement.
Thank you, Cheryl. Yes, it is indeed unique. And I think, the best way to summarize why and how I got here is through my lived experience, my academic experience, and now my professional experience. I'll start a little bit about my why and what led me here. I'm the proud daughter of immigrants from Zacatecas, Mexico, and Havana, Cuba. And my parents came to the US for the American dream. Quickly they were cycled into poverty, I think, as many immigrants are. And I think one of the things about my story that really, really shapes how I show up as a leader today is that my story went from poverty to prosperity because I had family, I had educators, and I had my community come alongside me and just champion every single dream I've had. And so they made it very clear that my circumstances were not going to define my future. And I think that as I've gone through a very unconventional life journey, I have really held to that truth that when people work together, children can and will thrive. And design engagement is that. It says it in the name. When we design systems of engagement to really foster relationships, the outcomes will be impacted. And so I just have a lot of joy in being able to do what my life story showed me to be true.
You have this wonderful video on your website. So anybody who's listening to the podcast really should go to the website and watch. It's your video. It's like your why video, like why you
Yes.
started the company. And it tells your story and the story about your mother. And one part that I really liked was how you looked at these three sectors of someone's experience and you said, and correct me if I have the language wrong, but something like the family are the experts in their children, and educators are the experts in their curriculum, and the communities are there to support and provide support for them all. So I
Yeah.
loved this concept that you experience as an individual of how important it is to have all three things working together for a student to really achieve.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's very true. When you look at a child, the first teacher of a child is their parent. They know their child. And as you progress as a child and you enter the educational system, then the teacher starts knowing the child. But when a child enters the school system, they enter with that intent to learn something. And that's where the expertise of the educator comes in. They know the curriculum. And along the way, you have community and community members who have these resources, these extra pieces that they can support the children. So very much my lived experience, but also now as a practitioner, I know that 50 plus years of research demonstrate that truth.
Yeah, so I know working in higher education, one of the big struggles is involving families. How do you involve families? How do you involve community? Sometimes I see colleges even try to do it all, try to be the family and the community and the educator. Do you have any like success stories or examples of how your company has come in and supported schools in building these relationships?
Yeah, and so I want to acknowledge one of the reasons that happens, and then kind of share out, some of the solutions that we've put out in the field. So when you think about engagement from K through 12, you have high engagement from families in elementary school, right? They're going to the PTA meetings sometimes, or they're coming to volunteer, which are very traditional ways of engagement. And you start seeing that engagement to start to taper off as they get older. One, it's not clear as to how families can engage. And two, again, systems of engagement aren't intentionally designed so families at new grade levels can engage very intentionally. And so it's very evident in this journey that you have less engagement in like middle school and in high school. And so one thing for us is working with our K through 12 educators to intentionally design those systems to help increase the engagement despite the grade level. Families are really excited and ready and willing to engage there, as they are in 12th grade, but educators and families just haven't, you know, created, I would say, co-created new systems. Now, in higher ed, I think that translates because if you think about it as like a ladder, the tapering off continues in higher ed. And so you have less family engagement. That doesn't mean that they're not there and they're not engaged. It just means that we have to be really rethinking how we engage them. Now, on the higher ed side, one really successful practice that we have started to see and work with our partners is creating curriculum that helps families understand how to navigate that transition from 12, well, from high school into higher ed. And I think the gem here that I want to make sure people catch is that navigational capital of how to actually transition from one grade level to another, and then going from the K through 12 to the higher ed and career space, if you will.
I love that idea of curriculum for parents in higher ed. I'm thinking when I taught community college, I taught for years public speaking classes, and I once had somebody pacing outside my class. Like, it was really weird, like looking in the door, and like I ended up breaking class and going outside to see what was going on. And it was this 18-year-old's mom. I think she just wanted to be involved. Like, she just wanted to know what was happening with her son. And I
Yeah,
was like, well, you can't, he's doing great. I can't talk to you about his grades. Like, you're not allowed to share. He's an adult.
right.
But this poor mom, like, she just wanted, like, she just wanted something, like someone throw her a bone. And this poor kid was so embarrassed. It was like this mom pacing outside. But I look back and I think, like, wow, wouldn't have that had been great if the college had had some sort of curriculum for parents? Like, here's how you can support your student, or here's things that you can do as they go through college,
Yeah.
particularly for parents who haven't gone to college themselves. Like, they don't know what role they can play or how they can support.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh my gosh, that's such a vivid example. I don't actually think I've shared this many times publicly, but I'm going to share it here because it's so important. As a first-gen Latina with parents well, a mother from Mexico specifically, she was so afraid for me to go off to college. I actually was accepted into the Naval Academy, and she was like, we lived at the time in Austin, Texas. And she was like, you are not going to Annapolis. I don't even know where that's at. And there was this big fear, right? But I
Right.
think that's true whether it's a university, in another state, or even a university in another city. You've had your child, you've been able to raise them inside your home, and then all of a sudden, your most precious person in your life is going to leave to somewhere that you don't know and understand. And then you get into the complex nature of like the HIPAA, the FERPA rules, all the things, and a teacher can't, or a professor can't share with their families, that information. But if we demystify it, even if it's general, and let them know, like, this is part of navigating educational systems, this is what you can expect. And just because we, as the professor, cannot share with you, that doesn't mean that your child can't share, or your young professional can't share what is happening at that school. And I think we need to do a better job as a society, as a system, if you will, to educate our families around what they can expect in the higher ed space, and even in post higher ed, so that there's less fear and a little bit more trust. Because I think that's what it comes down to. Parents don't trust that next step that their child is taking because they don't know what it looks like.
Yeah, that's such a great point, because I mean, even in communication theory, there's something called uncertainty reduction, and we try to reduce uncertainty, and we're more comfortable and supportive in situations where there's not as much uncertainty. And for students who this is their first your first generation college students, talk about uncertainty. Nobody in the family knows what's happening. No one's been through it before. But I think about a lot of my clients, we don't have any, even we don't even have a website for parents. Like, what can you expect? How can you support your student? I have questions. Who can I call? What information can I get? There's nothing. It's just like, your kid's 18. Yeah, goodbye, parents.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. Goodbye. And and I'm not saying that this is the case in every Latin American country, but I will say in a lot of Latin American countries, it is not the culture that after 18 it's goodbye. Whereas in the US, when you're 18, you're like, I'm 18. That's like, and parents are like, wait a minute, what is that? So there's a dissonance between like cultural things. But I
Yeah.
love what you said, and I'm gonna have to look at this, Cheryl, this uncertainty.
Uncertainty reduction.
Person
Yes.
reduction, because that gives me
Yeah.
more language of what families are experiencing. That's exactly what's happening.
Yeah. And when you are uncertain, you tend to like retreat from something. You want to protect yourself from it. And it's actually really interesting. We could go down this rabbit hole forever, but certain cultures have a higher tolerance for uncertainty, and
Mhm,
other cultures have a lower tolerance for it.
mhm.
And so low tolerance cultures will tend to move away from things that are uncertain. So you need more communication and you need more support to make them feel comfortable. Um,
Yeah,
we tend to forget that, I think, especially for parents. Yeah. I think
absolutely.
about my own 16-year-old. He doesn't want to tell me anything. I'm like, throw me a bone, just tell me something. Something.
Yeah, just let me in, let me in. And well, then there's another piece of it, right?
Right.
There's that developmental phase that children and young adults and young professionals are going through. So it's that cultural layer, then there's a developmental layer. So it's very complex, but it goes back, I think, to systems of communication, systems of relationship, really sharing knowledge. And none of it's going to be perfect, but I think if it's intentional, that's where the win is.
That's great. Well, I want to talk to you a little bit about retention. But before we do that, let's take a quick break and hear from our sponsor, and then we'll be right back. How do higher education decision makers find the right solution when technology evolves at light speed? Well, we usually start with our network. EdTech Connect is the network that's democratizing the higher ed technology conversation. EdTech Connect is free, so anyone with a .edu email address can sign up and list the software and services they use in their role at their school. Once you're in, you can find out what solutions similar schools are doing all over the country. Whether you're looking to find the hot new AI tool, or maybe learn options you have to upgrade your campus search engine, or even get to your short list of marketing solution vendors, EdTech Connect is the place to go. So visit edtechconnect.com and set up your free profile to get a pulse for what's happening with higher ed technology today. All right, we're back. So before the break, we were talking a lot about involving parents and helping reduce uncertainty in communications. And I would envision that this would really, help with retention. And I look at community colleges in particular, it's just who we mostly work with. And retention is huge. They
Mhm.
will have giant incoming classes, and then only half of the students stay for the second semester. What type of advice and work do you do to help support retention on campuses?
Yeah, retention is such a big deal. And it's true for K through 12 as higher ed, right? Retention and mobility are both big, I would say, pain points, and even absenteeism. And the research is very clear. When families are engaged as partners, you will see a reduction in that. So having families as key partners in your students' education, whether you're in K through 12 or in higher ed, will directly have an impact on how you retain the mobility and also, absenteeism. And so when I think about the things that folks can do on their campus or on and anywhere really, higher ed or K through 12, it's really thinking about how do we communicate with families, how do we share knowledge, and also how do we set up the student for success to navigate this system, right? And now we're talking about higher ed in particular, and your question is around community colleges. We have known for a long time, community colleges have this challenge with the transfer, right? And so it's complex, and it's complex for the student, and it's most definitely complex for a family who's never navigated community colleges. And so with that, I think it's imperative for the community college leaders to be very thoughtful on how they're building the students' capacity to really understand and be able to communicate the pathway of how they will transfer, if they will transfer into a four-year college, if they're not transferring to a four-year college, what that will look like for them to stay there. And I think a lot of great people are doing amazing work in trying to advance that. But I do think that one of the missing links is figuring out how to communicate with families. And one way is partnering with students to share that knowledge with families.
Oh, that's interesting. So how have you seen that done, that partnership with students to share the knowledge? Like, what are some tips that you would have for college to start thinking about how they could do or promote something like that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just the way you give a student like a year calendar, right? And you give a syllabus, it's the same kind of communication tool that you can incorporate. These are things that you can share out with your families. And so it's, with you sharing like a comms background, right?
Right.
These are like the talking points. You can give students talking points to share out to families and to those that support them, that knowledge, so that it doesn't become that it isn't unexpected, and they can find support through that journey. And that's a very simple tool. Another tool that we've seen be very effective is these peer groups, right? Student to student, and being able to support one another, as well as family groups, right? Some of the more successful practices is how can a university foster social capital among the families so that they can rely on one another and feel this sense of community to communicate the expectations that the school has, or any changes or any knowledge that perhaps they didn't get because they didn't attend a meeting, or didn't hear from their student.
You know what's so interesting? God, these are such great ideas, and they're so simple. I mean,
They
this is
are.
not like I'm like, why isn't anyone doing this? Like, this is so easy. I'm thinking about my son who's in 11th grade, and he is an athlete. And I get more communication from his coach than I do from any of his teachers, from the dean of students. They don't call them a principal at his school, it's called the dean of students. Dean of students. I like, we have an app, we have family dinners, we know when they're playing, we're asked for volunteers for I mean, like, I am so involved in soccer. Like, I put more energy into soccer than academics, and it just hit me. And I think it's because I know what's going on, and I'm
Yeah.
invited, right?
Yeah. Oh
I'm
my gosh.
invited to be a part of it. Yeah.
That is so
Really, academics is so much more important than soccer. And don't let me, like, if he heard me say that, he would, but I should be more involved in the academic side and getting ready, but I'm not, because there's nothing coming from the school to help me as a parent support him. Yeah,
Yeah. And I think the key part that you lifted up is I'm invited.
I'm invited.
Yeah. And that's it, right? It's so funny because I've gone to my nephew's soccer games, and I see like this tremendous level of family engagement in soccer games, like from the
Oh
snap,
yeah.
from the like yelling on the lines, like all of it. It's intense.
Yeah.
And wow, there's a culture here. And I think sometimes what happens in K through 12 or in higher ed, we get used to these systems that we have in play. We really kind of stay stuck in engaging means going to school and volunteering. Engaging means doing that, meet the teacher night, or whatever the traditional mechanisms of engagement are. But when you think about that experience that you have with your son's coach and that community, they've invited you. They're
Yeah.
creating this culture of we're doing this together because at the end of the day, we want to win. And that is
Right.
the same mindset. That is the same
Yeah.
mindset that we should come to the table with our students in academia. We should say, we want to come together and build this culture because we want to win. We want to see the student win. And if we do that, it's game changing. And I'm not even a sports person.
Yeah, I know. No, it's so true. I mean, it's just like a big aha moment for me right now. Like I know every single name of every boy on that soccer team. Like I know their parents' names, I know their names. Like tonight, one of the parents is having a spaghetti dinner, but this isn't happening like in school. Like it is school, obviously, but it's not happening academically. Like
Yeah.
what a cool way if it were the school were to find a way to create more opportunities to have parents that involved, you know,
Yeah.
curriculum and supporting other students. Because I'm not, when I'm cheering on the sideline, I'm not just cheering for my son, I'm cheering for Daniel and Sawyer and Lasse and like I know all these kids, I'm screaming their names, but if we're
Yeah.
not doing that academically, so
Yeah.
an opportunity to be able to think, for schools to be able to think, how can we create that community, academically or for transfer. So
Yeah, no,
yeah,
and I think it goes back to some systems. I've actually just yesterday I was talking to a principal and I said, and I asked, because we've been working with them on reimagining family engagement on their campus, and I inquired about, how often are teachers reaching out to families and when, and they're like, oh, just a few times a year because there's
right.
this, and this, and I'm like, okay, well, let me ask you a question. Do they have time? Does your schedule allow for them to have time to make the call, to build those relationships? And she paused and she's like, no, actually, we don't. So when I think about systems, I think about we have to create the time for our teachers to have the opportunity to foster that relationship with the family, right? To foster the relationship among the families. And when I think about other opportunities that in conversations that I've had, it's like, well, time costs money, right? Time is a resource as well, and we don't have it because we have to focus on the academics. But what people are missing, what educators, more so, I'm going to say like system leaders, I heart you, but what we're missing here is, yes, academics are very important, but if we do not take time to create time for people to build relationships, it's going to be very difficult for students to increase and improve academically because relationships really make a difference for everyone.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a really, really critical point is we keep asking, the people on the ground to do more and more and more, but we're not giving them more time or resources to do it. So it's good to ask leaders, how are you going to work this in? And how are you going to create time and space for people for teachers and for other administrators and student support to do this, right?
Yeah, time is definitely one of them. I will also say the other part is the how you do it, right? The coach maybe naturally does it because, coaches like they're just trained. They're like, we want to win. So I got to bring everybody together, right? And so they have that skill kind of organically. But teachers, educators, like they do not receive training on communication in pre-service or in service. And we have to do better job in education of building their capacity to be able to reach out to families, to be able to create that sense of community and that sense of like coaching, right? Like we're doing this together. So I would say the second one would be definitely capacity building on how to actually do that.
And that's also a great point about training and communication, because I mean, yesterday we were, use the soccer analogy, the boys were tied at halftime against a team that they beat 8-0 last time. So like it should have
Right.
been, yeah, they came in overconfident and the coach said something at halftime, and we came back and ended up winning the game. But I don't think faculty have been taught, like, when a student is struggling or not, or a student is not working towards their potential, just giving them a poor grade isn't going to help motivate them to succeed. So how do you, providing that training on how do you coach a student and raise their value and maybe involve their community, to get them motivated to continue.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I know that example I was giving a little bit more through the K through 12, but in higher ed, that relationship with the professors are also very, very critical.
Right.
And I think that one way to do it is during office hours and encourage everyone, maybe even make it mandatory, like come to an office hours to do a meet and greet, because it is really a game changer, as well as make it easy to access, to have access to the professor, because I feel like sometimes, you have to set a meeting with the TA or it's just like
Right.
5 or 6 steps to get to being able to schedule time. And that's too complicated, especially for students, especially right now in this instant gratification world that we live in. You need to make it where they can literally press the button and have something scheduled with
Yeah,
you. That's how easy.
exactly. Now you have a book, Five Principles to Strengthen Relationships with Students. So I'm sure some of what we talked about is probably in this book.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about the book and maybe give me an example of like one of your principles that you cover in that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I want to start by saying I wrote this book because I absolutely adore educators. Like, I would not be the woman that I am right now if I did not have educators, especially one educator, Miss Tabasoli, which I know she'll listen to this because we're still friends.
Oh, that's awesome. Well,
Yeah.
shout out to her.
That was her. It pour into me and, let me know that my circumstances were not going to define me, that I was meant for big things. And in this very difficult time that we're experiencing in education, we're seeing an exodus of teachers. And my call to action to teachers with this book is we need you in education. Take care of yourself, right? But if you are called to teach, we want you to show up. And this book is to remind you of your purpose. And as you go through it, I drop stories that I experienced as a child, and I lift up these principles that I think are very important. And I think I'll lift up two. Well, actually, I'll talk about one, the framing, because I think it's really important, and then I'll lift one of my favorite ones. So the framing is the special position of an educator, and it's really important for us not to miss this, right? I didn't know this until I went to grad school. And what I learned was that according to Yuri Bronfenbrenner's ecological systems theory model, the people that are closest to a child and a student, right, are their family, their educators, and their community members. And it was this like aha moment. And when I was writing the book, I wanted to be very intentional to lift up that model, but to also talk about positionality. And that means that as teachers, your position in the life of a child is one of privilege, and you have the power to transform lives, to end generational poverty if you pour into a child like I was poured into. So that I don't want people to miss. Like, your positionality is like powerful. With that, in your classroom and in your lecture hall, the principle that I think is really rich and one of my favorite ones, and this is just about education, is creating high quality learning environments. Whether you're an elementary teacher, whether you're a high school teacher, whether you're a coach, whether you're a professor teaching calculus or all the microbiology things that go above my head, whatever course you are teaching in college, if you do not intentionally curate a space of learning where it is engaging, where it's fun, where it's dynamic, where it feels like a student can like try on the learning and expand their thinking, you need a little bit of PD to refine your craft. And I say that gently, right? Because I wasn't an educator. Originally, I come from the business background, but we all are on our journey to refine our craft. And it takes practice. Some people are just naturally really good at creating high quality learning environments. And shout out to you. And some people just need a little bit of practice. But that principle, I think, is really important because that's what catches the attention of students. That's what keeps them engaged. That's what keeps them excited. And that's what gets them learning time and time again, inside and outside the classroom.
Right, right. That is so true because I think also people get burned out and you forget that every new class is new. Like
Yeah,
you as a teacher may not be new, right?
yeah,
But the class is and the student is. And
right.
so there are times where I've seen great faculty who lose some of that intentionality and that, you know,
Yeah.
the dynamic excitement that they might have had when they were younger. They just get like crushed over time. So yeah, you have to remember what an impact you are, right? What an amazing piece of somebody's life you are as an educator.
Yes, no, for sure. Actually, now I'm bringing in what I closed the book with, which is very valid. Like, and I think, and I appreciate you uplifting that. People are burnt out, and so sometimes you may not need that extra PD, but what you need is just to take care of yourself. And in the book, I reference like an airplane example. Sometimes you have to put your oxygen mask on. Always, you have to put your oxygen mask on before you go and support others. And that's true in teaching. If you feel like your light is being dim as an educator, like take a step back so you can take care of yourself
Right.
and be able to show up as that brilliant educator that you are.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, this has just been such a fun conversation, and you have so many great insights. I think people are going to learn a lot from this conversation, and hopefully can visit your website and pick up a copy of your book. How can people get in touch with you? Where can they find you if they want to learn more about your company and you as well?
Thank you, Cheryl. So they could go on to marcelaandres.com. There's more information, more podcast, and a link to the book there, as well as a link to my company, designEDengagement. And you can also visit designEDengagement.com. But really, if you just Google me, I'm pretty searchable, and you can contact me. I won't give my cell phone number, but oftentimes at conferences I have, and people are like, never call me, but that's okay. That's probably good. So I won't do it
No,
on
but look, you're practicing what you preach.
exactly,
You're
exactly.
being available and you're creating a community for people, which I love. Well,
Yes.
thank you so much, Marcella. This has been a great conversation, and I hope people reach out to you. I know that you've got your book, your company, and you do speaking engagements as well. So you have so much value to offer, and I wish you the best of luck.
Likewise. Thank you so much, Cheryl. I hope we definitely stay in contact and good luck with those soccer games.
Oh, thanks.